Chapter 16. Days of Rain. After all the strange books they had found in Oddities and Curiosities, Hoggie was expecting something even stranger. A tornado, an avalanche, or even a herd of angry rhinos stampeding through the library. But nothing of the sort happened. In fact, nothing at all happened. The Mirror was quite an ordinary book. Ordinary in the sense that its pages contained nothing but text and pictures.
Hoggie
said.
I guess we'll have to read the book to find out what's so special about it.
But after she leafed through a few pages, Hoggie realized that they would not learn the secret of the Mirror by reading it either. Whatever language the book was written in, it was not English.
Is this Arabic?
Hoggie asked, examining the unfamiliar lettering. Scooter shook his head.
It isn't Persian either.
The friends studied the Mirror's faded illustrations, hoping that these would give them an idea as to what the book was about. But the pictures weren't much help either. Very simple. They captured ordinary scenes out of ordinary people's lives. Farmers harvesting wheat, children playing in a river, masons building a castle.
So much for the most interesting story ever written.
Hoggie could not hide her disappointment.
Is this what Dr. Barnaby wanted us to find? Out of all the fantastic books we've seen in the secret library, this is the one he is looking for?
With a snort of contempt, she dropped the Mirror on Scooter's lap, and began to tidy up Oddities and Curiosities' room. Scooter studied the little brown book.
Maybe, he suggested, this isn't the Mirror. But it matches Dr. Barnaby's description,
Hoggie remarked from the bottom of the staircase. She picked up some of the books off the floor and stacked them up.
Give me a hand, will you?
Obediently, Scooter trotted downstairs.
Then perhaps there is more to it than meets the eye, he said. Many of the books in this room look quite ordinary, but we know that they are not. Besides,
he followed Hoggie up the stairs, the stack of books in his hands.
Why would Alexander Libri go into so much trouble hiding the book in a secret room in a secret library, unless it was a very special book? I don't know.
Hoggie shut the now empty wall safe, and began to put the shelves back onto the wall.
Why do you think he did it?
But Scooter didn't know either.
Perhaps it has evidence of some sort, you know? Like some event historians always thought had happened, but they could never prove it, and now this book will. Or maybe they used to think that the man who wrote the book was just a legend, like that Greek, Homer, and now they know that he was real. You may be right,
Hoggie conceded.
How about we stop guessing, and just take the book to Dr. Barnaby? He will know if it's the Mirror, and if it is, perhaps he can tell us what it is about. And even if he can't, at least we'll get paid.
She added,
if we get paid tonight, I want a large pizza with olives. After all this searching, I'm absolutely starved. Can we make that olives and mushrooms?
Scooter, too, was beginning to feel hungry. Hoggie shoved the Mirror into her backpack, and the friends hurried out of the library. On their way to the Luxembourg Hotel, Hoggie began to feel increasingly excited about the possibility of collecting the £2,000 that very night. She was therefore quite disappointed when the hotel's concierge told the children that Dr. Barnaby was not in his room.
Will he be back later tonight?
Hoggie asked hopefully.
I am afraid I cannot tell, Luigi replied. We haven't seen Dr. Barnaby for a few days.
Where is he?
The man shrugged.
His luggage is still here, and he has paid for his room until the end of the month. I assume he is planning to come back sometime.
Can we leave him a note?
Of course.
There was a stack of paper sheets with the hotel's logo on the counter. Scooter took one, and wrote Dr. Barnaby a short message. At first, he wanted to tell the archaeographer that he and Hoggie had found the Mirror, but then he remembered Dr. Barnaby warning them about other people being after the book. Any one of them could steal a glance at the note, and so, in the end, Scooter wrote just this.
Dear Dr. Barnaby, We have some very urgent news for you. Please call us as soon as you can. Hoggie and Scooter. Well, that's done, Scooter said, as he and Hoggie emerged out of the hotel back into the street. All we have to do now is to wait for Dr. Barnaby's call. In the meantime, what shall we do with the book? Scooter thought about it for a moment. You better take it to your place. I can't trust General not to eat it. By then it was nearly dark. It was also starting to rain again, and so the friends hurried home. It rained without end for days. Slowly, Camden's ancient rain gutters became clogged, and the water began to spill onto the roads and sidewalks. The Regent's Park turned into a bog. The invariably grey clouds blocked the sunlight, making the still short days seem even shorter. The rain chased Londoners off the streets. Even Higgledy and Piggledy didn't want to go out in this miserable weather. Hoggie took advantage of her confinement by catching up on her studies. With Scooter's help, she made up all the maths and science quizzes she had missed, and did such a good job on her 2 English essays that she was now guaranteed a passing grade. She even managed to get back in Mrs. Hamilton's good graces. It occurred to her that she could write her history report on Alexander Libri. "He may not be a famous man," she noted, "but he sure is a great one." When Hoggie told Mrs. Hamilton about her interest in the architect, the houses he built, and about all the articles and Museum of London records she was going to use in her report, the deputy headmistress was quite surprised. "I think this is an excellent idea, Claus," she said, taking off her glasses and giving Hoggie a long, penetrating look, as if she was not sure if Hoggie was really Hoggie, or some completely different person. "It is not very often that my students show any interest in local history." Hoggie shrugged. "It seems more interesting to me than some stuff that happened centuries ago in some place I've never been to." "Excellent idea," Mrs. Hamilton repeated. "Carry on. Feel free to talk to me if you need help." And so Hoggie spent several subsequent evenings poring over the various documents she and Scooter collected in their investigation into the life of Alexander Libri. Meanwhile, Scooter tried to solve the mystery of the mirror. He found a book in the city library that had examples of all written languages known to modern scholars, from the Assyrian cuneiform, the enigmatic wedge-shaped characters the people of ancient Mesopotamia once used, to the Elvish runes, a language invented by the English writer J.R.R. Tolkien. He then compared every single example in the book to the handwritten text of the mirror. Sadly, none of the examples were a match. "It's like this book is from another world," Scooter stated in frustration one evening. They were in his dad's study, Scooter in front of the computer screen, Hoggie curled up on the couch, dozens of volumes on her lap and at her feet. Every now and then she stopped reading and shooed General away from the books. "I find it hard to believe that no one knows anything about it." Scooter picked up the mirror, and for the 100th time studied its enigmatic script. "I mean, we know everything about the ancient Egyptian and Aramaic, and nobody has spoken those languages for thousands of years. This book isn't even that old." He put the book down and yawned. "Are you all right?" Hoggie inquired. "You've been yawning all day." "I didn't have much sleep last night," Scooter explained. "All because of General." "What did he do this time?" "I don't know what set him off, but he kept clawing at the bedroom door and making loud, threatening noises. Kept me up half the night." General must have sensed that the children were talking about him. He stopped trying to steal one of Hoggie's books, came near Scooter, and placed his huge head on the boy's lap. "I'm not angry at you, silly bird," Scooter said. "I just wish you slept at night and hunted during the day like other animals." He patted the dodo's dishevelled feathers, and turned to Hoggie. "How is your report?" "Good," Hoggie replied. "It's almost done. I've been reading the letters Catherine gave us, the ones her grandfather's friend had written. You'll never guess what this friend's name was." "What was it?" "Edward Barnaby." Scooter scratched his chin. "That's quite a coincidence," I know."
Hoggy flipped through the stack of letters.
"Do you think this Edward Barnaby is related to our Dr. Barnaby?"
"Well, it is not a very common name," Scooter said pensively, "and considering that both our Barnaby and that other Barnaby are somehow connected to Alexander Libri, I'd say yes, they must be related. What did this Edward Barnaby do?"
"I'm not sure. I think he was a scholar of some sort. But that's not important. What is important is this."
Hoggy pulled one of the letters out of the stack, and waved it before Scooter's eyes.
"This is a letter Edward Barnaby sent to Libri in July of 1928. Listen to what he wrote."
Hoggy unfolded the letter, and read,
"Dear Alexander, I am very sorry to hear about your trouble. I am also relieved to learn that no one was hurt, and that the collection remains intact. A guardian's job has always been a difficult and even dangerous one. We all remember the unfortunate fate of the Vincenzas, and I understand your desire to protect your own family by removing the cause of all future disasters from your house. As far as the collection's new home goes, I think your plan absolutely brilliant. What is a better place for it than this temple of knowledge, this sanctuary for all the curious and pure minds?" 1928?
Scooter wrinkled his forehead. "Wasn't it the time when Libri's house was broken into?"
"It was."
Hoggy nodded.
"And I bet you this is exactly the trouble Edward Barnaby is writing about. The collection is obviously the Libri's book collection, and the brilliant plan must be the architect's plan to hide the books in the public library. You know, the Temple of Knowledge."
"And the Vincenzas must be that Italian family Icarus told you about, the ones who died in a fire."
Scooter finished his friend's thought. As Hoggy re-read the scholar's letter, another idea occurred to her.
"Scooter,"
she declared,
"if Dr. Barnaby is related to Edward Barnaby, then he must have known about the secret library from the very beginning."
"You're right, Hoggy,"
Scooter agreed.
"Then why didn't he tell us about it? He'd save us weeks. And here is another thing. If Dr. Barnaby knew about the secret library, why didn't he just go there himself, instead of hiring us?"
Now that they had seen every tome in Alexander Libri's secret collection, Hoggy wondered if one of them could be the very unusual book every book thief in the world seemed to be after.
"I bet it's How to Rid Your Garden of Moles," she declared. "With a book like that, you'll never ever have to pay another electricity bill."
"Well, if I were a book thief," Scooter replied, "I'd go after the Book of Birds.
Think of all the extinct and endangered species you could restore with a book like that."
"But then again," the boy added, "I'm no book expert. Dr. Barnaby, on the other hand, is as great an expert as they come, and he is only interested in the mirror."
Once again, the children studied the outlandish symbols that filled the pages of the mirror. Whatever the book's secret was, it was hidden well. Monday morning, Hoggy was getting ready for school. Aunt Michelle, who worked late the previous night, was still in bed. So when the girl sat down to breakfast, she only had the TV to keep her company. The morning news started with a report on the sightings of a large animal in St. John's Wood. For a few moments, Hoggy listened to some cab driver's confused account of his night encounter with the beast. But when the news reporter went on to debate whether the sighted animal was just an unusually large dog, or some wild creature that had wandered into London from the country, she turned off the sound, and continued eating her porridge in silence. She was putting her dirty dishes into the kitchen sink, when a familiar image on the TV screen captured her attention again. It was a picture of the Luxembourg Hotel.
"What's that about?"
Hoggy wondered. She grabbed the remote control, and turned the sound on, just in time to hear the news reporter say,
"More details on the fire of the Luxembourg Hotel. To remind our viewers
The fire broke out late last night on the hotel's 4th floor. The building's fire alarm alerted the personnel on duty, and the guests were safely evacuated. The incident was not, however, without fatalities. A few of the guests were treated for burns and smoke poisoning. At least one death resulted from the fire. An unknown male, whose charred body was found in room 406. The police have not yet confirmed the identity of the victim, but according to the administration of the hotel, the room was registered in the name of Dr. Victor N. Barnaby.
Hoggie gasped.
Earlier today, the reporter continued meanwhile, the fire department confirmed that room 406 was the epicenter of the fire. The forensic investigators do not rule out a premeditated action. The police have not yet revealed any of the details, but it appears that the victim was dead before the fire started.
Hoggie turned off the TV, and for a few minutes stared at the black screen. She was astonished and terrified. The visions of the Luxembourg Hotel, wrapped in flames, were haunting her, and so was the question, what exactly happened in room 406? Just then the phone rang, making Hoggie jump. She picked up the receiver, and Scooter's agitated voice boomed in her ear.
"Did you hear about the Luxembourg?"
"I did."
"I can't believe this is happening," Scooter squeaked. "How can Dr. Barnaby be dead?"
Hoggie could tell from her friend's trembling voice that he was about to fall to pieces.
"Don't panic, Scooter,"
she said, trying to make her own voice sound as calm and as confident as possible.
"It may all be just a misunderstanding. You know how the TV people like to blow things out of proportions."
She paused for a moment.
"Meet me outside the hotel in half an hour."
The Luxembourg Hotel was surrounded by hundreds of onlookers, even though by then there wasn't much left to see. The fire had been put out, and all of the hotel's guests had been evacuated. The hotel's first 3 stories looked just as they always did, neat and festive. The 4th floor, however, was all scorched. The panes of its windows had been shattered, and here and there in its facade were gaping holes. Hoggie and Scooter stood on the sidewalk across from the hotel for a few minutes, watching the firemen strip the building's smouldering roof. Suddenly, they spotted in the crowd the Luxembourg's concierge. The man was clutching the hotel's register and a lamp.
"Luigi!"
the children cried, elbowing their way through the crowd. As they drew near the concierge, they saw huge tears rolling down the man's cheeks.
"This is a disaster,"
the concierge complained to his young acquaintances.
"Our hotel, our beautiful hotel, reduced to ashes by some careless idiot. Smokers are a menace. I have been telling this to the owner for years. But would he listen?"
"You think it was a cigarette that started the fire, then?"
Scooter asked.
"What else?"
Luigi wiped his tears at the corner of the register.
"This is how 9 out of 10 fires start."
"And is it true that somebody died?"
"I am afraid so,"
Luigi confirmed.
"Was it really Dr. Barnaby?"
The concierge nodded.
"I'm sorry. He was a friend of yours, wasn't he?" "Not a friend, no," Scooter replied. "An acquaintance."
Luigi nodded again.
"It's a horrible thing."
"How did he die?"
Luigi shrugged.
"No one knows. I didn't even know he was at the hotel. He had been away for the last few days. Even his room key was still in the concierge's desk."
Hoggie made a mental note of this odd fact. Just then the rain grew heavier, and the crowd outside the hotel began to thin rapidly. The children, too, started for school.
"Do you think Dr. Barnaby was murdered?"
Hoggie had been asking herself the exact same question ever since she heard about the fire, and still she was not sure what the answer was.
"The newspapers say that he was dead before the fire started," Scooter carried on, "and that fire might have been started on purpose."
Hoggie still wasn't sure whether Dr. Barnaby died a violent death, but she had to agree that it all looked very suspicious.
And if someone did murder Dr. Barnaby, Scooter persisted, why do you think they did it?
Once again, Hoggy was unsure. There could be hundreds of reasons, of course, but most likely it had something to do with what Dr. Barnaby did for a living. He was a book expert and a book collector, and from what Catherine Libri and Icarus Finn told her and Scooter about the world of book collectors, it could be quite brutal.
You don't think it was because of the book he was looking for?
Scooter asked fearfully.
You don't think it was because of the mirror?
Hoggy considered this for a moment. There did not seem to be anything exceptional about the mirror. By now, she and Scooter had seen many books far more valuable, books adorned with gold and jewels, books written by famous dead people, books that could bring about flocks of exotic birds. Compared to them, the mirror was quite dull. Of course it could be not the book itself, but rather what was written in it. Hoggy remembered the gallery of forbidden books. There were times when one could be imprisoned, or even burned at the stake, for reading some of them. But they were not living in the Middle Ages any more. Today, anyone could read any book they wanted. In fact, today, a much bigger problem was that people did not want to read at all. So, all things considered, Hoggy did not think that Dr. Barnaby's death had anything to do with the mirror.
Still, she told Scooter, we should be very careful from now on. If you notice anything odd, tell me right away, and let us not go anywhere alone.
Scooter thought it was a good plan.
What about the book?
He then asked. Hoggy pondered this for a few seconds.
We'd better put it back into the wall safe for now.
Wednesday started as usually, with a heavy rain. By the time Hoggy finished walking Higgledy and Piggledy, and dropped them off at their owner's place, she was wet all the way to her skin. As she was changing into some dry clothes, she heard the phone ring.
"I'll get it,"
her aunt cried from the kitchen. When Hoggy, finally ready for school, entered the kitchen, Aunt Michelle was just finishing her conversation, while scribbling something on one of the old receipts that were piled up by the phone.
"You are never going to believe what this was about," Aunt Michelle said, hanging up the phone and rubbing her hands excitedly. "What was it about? This man, who just called, wants to hire me to work for him. What sort of work? Painting."
Suddenly, Hoggy could see why Aunt Michelle was so excited. She did not often have a chance to make a living by her art. It was a shame, too, because, in Hoggy's opinion, her aunt was a very talented artist. Aunt Michelle served Hoggy her breakfast. She served herself as well, but didn't touch any of it. She was really quite thrilled.
"He had seen one of my paintings, and liked it very much," she twittered. "He owns a number of buildings in London. Offices, hotels, restaurants. One of them is being renovated, and he thought that it would be nice to have a mural painted in the foyer. Did you hear that, Hoggy? A mural!"
Aunt Michelle pressed her hand against her heart in an attempt to stop it from throbbing.
"I can't believe it! Me! A mural! This is going to be at least a month's worth of work. And if they like the mural, maybe I'll get more work. This is my chance, Hoggy. Just make sure they pay you fairly. Oh, I don't think this man is short of money," Aunt Michelle said confidently. "I'm meeting him in about 2 hours. Oh, my goodness, I haven't washed my hair in days."
She jumped up and ran out of the kitchen. Hoggy finished her breakfast alone and started for school.
"Good luck, Aunt Michelle,"
she shouted already at the door.
"Thanks,"
Aunt Michelle echoed from inside the apartment.
"I'll go straight to work after the meeting. Get your own dinner, will you?" "I will,"
Hoggy assured her. Hoggy met Scooter on her way to school.
"I didn't have the time to listen to the news this morning,"
Hoggy explained as they made their way down the street, dodging the tidal waves of rain-water which erupted, now and again, from under the tires of the passing cars.
"Did you hear anything?"
She did not say what sort of news she was interested in, but Scooter knew exactly what his friend was asking about. The only news that attracted their attention in the last 48 hours was, of course, the news on the fire at the Luxembourg Hotel.
"Nothing," Scooter replied. "What about the police investigation?"
Scooter shook his head once again.
"No. It looks like everyone has already forgotten about it." "How can one forget about a murder?"
Scooter grabbed Hoggie's elbow to prevent her from walking into a puddle.
"You know, they never said it was a murder," he noted. "Perhaps we worry ourselves over nothing. After all, people die for all sorts of reasons. Dr. Barnaby could have had a heart attack or a stroke. He could have slipped in a shower and hit his head. Or he could have had some terminal disease. He could have been sick for years, and then just happened to die in his hotel room. And what about the fire?"
Scooter shrugged.
"Bad wiring. Or a TV set overheated and caught on fire. Or a cigarette fell out of an ashtray and onto the carpet. It happens all the time. If Dr. Barnaby were alive, he'd put the fire out. But if he were dead—"
Hoggie considered this for a few moments. What Scooter was saying did in fact make a lot of sense. Accidents happen all the time. Hoggie thought of her building's old wiring, which, one of these days, was going to electrocute someone, and about Mrs. Gullitch's nasty smoking habit, which set off the building's fire alarm at least once a week. Just because Dr. Barnaby was found dead in his room, it did not mean that he was murdered. Neither did the fire at the hotel mean that someone had started it on purpose. And certainly none of this meant that some evil man or men were after the couple of children and some book nobody could read. Hoggie felt suddenly relaxed.
"You're right, Scooter," she admitted. "If nothing has happened by now, it probably never will."
The next moment, both she and Scooter jumped aside with a startled squeal, as half a dozen rats crawled from under the sidewalk and darted away.
"The sewers must be flooded,"
Hoggie guessed, watching the little creatures scuttle down the street.
"When will this confounded rain stop?"
Because of the rain, the school was quieter than usual. Many of the students had not come. Those who had come yawned and daydreamed through most of their classes, and, unable to go outside, wandered the school's halls pointlessly during the breaks. The only event that brightened things up that day was a strange and inexplicable incident in the school cafeteria. It happened during the lunch break, when Hoggie and Scooter were sitting at their usual table. Scooter was showing Hoggie a solution to a maths problem they had been assigned the day before. Suddenly, the boy yelped and grabbed the back of his head.
"What happened?"
Hoggie asked. Scooter removed the hand from the back of his head and showed it to Hoggie. The hand was covered in mashed potatoes.
"Somebody threw that at you?"
Hoggie was enraged. She scanned the cafeteria in search of the boy or the girl who had thrown mashed potatoes at her friend. But none of the children seated around them seemed particularly malicious. They were eating their lunches quietly, or else chatting with their classmates. Suddenly, Hoggie spotted, slouched behind a table steps away from them, a very small boy. The boy was dressed in a denim jacket and a baseball cap that hid most of his face. On the table in front of the boy was a plate full of mashed potatoes.
"You can't do that,"
Hoggie said sternly.
"How would you like it if somebody threw their food at you?"
The boy did not reply. He did not even look up from his plate.
"Hey! I'm talking to you!"
Hoggie took a few steps towards the boy. It was then that she noticed the boy's hands laid flat on the table top. They had very long fingers, and were covered in thick, dark hair. And as she was staring at those strange hands, the boy raised his head, and Hoggie realized that the little boy was not a boy at all. It was a chimp. Just then, the chimp grinned, scooped some of the mashed potatoes with his hairy hand, and threw it at her.
"Holy cow!"
Hoggie cried, dodging the potatoes. The commotion attracted other children's attention. Heads were turned, and fingers were pointing.
"Look!"
the children yelled.
"It's a monkey! A real monkey!"
In response to this, the chimp grinned even wider, and began to throw the mashed potatoes right and left. The students screamed. Some of them, in an attempt to elude the chimp's missiles, darted out of the room, while others ran after the animal. the chimp jumped up onto the table, and began to hop from table to table, picking up apples, oranges, and meatballs, and flinging them at his pursuers. The cafeteria plunged into chaos. In the end, the deputy headmistress arrived, attracted by the noise, and with the help of the cafeteria staff, caught the chimp, and took him to Miss Chakrabarty's classroom. There the little rascal was locked in a cage until, later that day, a policeman came to take him away. As Hoggy watched the chimp being carried out of the cafeteria, screaming and kicking and baring his teeth at everyone, she had a strange feeling that she had seen the vicious animal before.
"The circus?"
Scooter suggested, pulling the mashed potatoes out of his hair.
"Or the zoo?"
But Hoggy had never been to the zoo, and Peducci's did not use animals. None of the Regent's Park students admitted bringing the chimp to school, and so the mystery of how the animal ended in the cafeteria remained, for the time being, unsolved. After the classes, Hoggy and Scooter went back to Hoggy's and Aunt Michelle's, and spent the afternoon in the kitchen working on their homework. They were interrupted only once, when Scooter's father called to tell his son that he could not come home that day because London's airports were closed. Around 4 in the afternoon, Scooter put down his pen.
"Well, I'm all done with my history report,"
he announced, displaying several pages of handwritten pages, to which a stack of newspaper and magazine clippings were attached. Hoggy nodded approvingly. Suddenly her eye caught one of the clippings. The clipping contained a photograph of old London.
"Hey!"
Hoggy said.
"I've seen this photograph before." "It is a famous photograph," Scooter replied. "You must have seen it in some book or magazine."
"No,"
Hoggy objected.
"I'm talking about the actual photograph."
Scooter considered this for a few moments.
"You must be thinking of some other photograph. This one," he pointed at the newspaper clipping, "was in the Peter Lynn collection. Lynn was a photographer who lived in London in the beginning of the 20th century. He took a lot of photographs of the city. Remember me telling you about how somebody broke into the Museum of London and stole the entire contents of the L drawer? That was when Peter Lynn's photographs disappeared. And, of course, Alexander Libri's plans were stolen with the rest of the papers."
A sudden realization dawned on Hoggy just then.
"Scooter,"
she said,
"I've seen Lynn's photographs. I've seen them all."
"Where?"
It was then that Hoggy told Scooter about her find in the library's attic.
"This is so strange,"
Scooter said in the end.
"Who put the photographs there? And why?"
"Maybe,"
it occurred to Hoggy,
"the thieves were after Libri's plans, and not the photographs to begin with. They kept what they wanted, and stashed the rest under the floorboards, because they just didn't know what to do with the lot."
"But why in the library?"
To that, Hoggy had no answer. Scooter remembered suddenly the upsided star map in the library's attic.
"I knew someone was following us," he said, suddenly feeling anxious again. "And those new books in the secret library. Someone would have to put them there."
Hoggy had to admit that this discovery was, indeed, very strange and very alarming.
"The mirror," she said thoughtfully. "Can this all be about the mirror, after all? If it is, Scooter, we must find out what this blasted book is."
Their conversation was interrupted by the ringing of the phone. Hoggy picked up the receiver.
"Hello,"
she said.
"Hoggy?"
"Yes. Who is this?"
The man on the other end of the line did not answer. Instead, he asked,
"Where is the mirror, Hoggy?"